with Paul Herr, the author of Primal Management. In the last section, we talked about the 5 hot buttons that drive achievement. We did the introduction. We introduced the first 2, innovation and competence. And in this section, we're going to finish up the final 3 competencies. So Paul, thanks again for being with us.
Thank you, David.
And we're going to go through these. We're going to apply them to our real estate managers, how they can use it in their business. So let's continue with the next hot buttons.
Well, we've covered the innovation hot button. Human beings, we're the technological species. If we don't develop technologies, we're dead. So they're nature built-in rewards to make sure we innovate. We talked about the competency hot button, which is basically as you master the skills of your group, your self-esteem goes up, and that's a huge part of the emotional paycheck. If you can boost your employees' self-esteem, that's a huge addition to the intrinsic paycheck.
Hey, before we get off of that, I want to ask you a question. How do you feel about contests? Contests and awards is a way of dealing with that. Is that work or not work?
You know, we'll get to contests in a minute. It can work. But I think competency is a more powerful kind of reward because it's the gift that keeps on giving. A reward, an award or a contest gift is like a one-time reward. It doesn't keep going.
Right.
If you can make people develop their competency, that's an annuity of good feelings.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious because I've never seen contests work in real estate ever. It's just demotivational more than everything.
Right.
And there's the 2 people that are going to win it. They already know that going in, and the other 40 go, I'll never have a chance to win it.
Right.
And okay, good. Well, let's continue with the next 3.
So we innovate, we develop, we master that technology, we master those skills. Now we got to use the skills over and over again to achieve specific goals. And I call that the achievement appetite. And that's the easiest of the appetites to understand because it's the euphoria of a win. It's the euphoria of hitting a golf ball down the middle of the fairway. It's the pleasure you get when you serve an ace in tennis.
Yeah.
And basically, the brain gives us a short-term spike, a short-term reward, a short-term euphoria to reward these kind of achievements or task attainment. And the pleasure doesn't last long because nature's message is, okay, here's your reward, now do it again.
Now do it again. Okay.
Use another skill to achieve a goal. Achieve, achieve, achieve. And men, by the way, have produced 3 times more dopamine than women, so we really like to win.
Okay.
And if you wonder why men are so darn competitive, it's because of that.
Okay.
Men are also 10-to-1 cocaine addicts over women because cocaine stimulates dopamine, and men love dopamine.
Okay.
So,
so is that similar to adrenaline? I mean, I ski and race cars and stuff like that. Is that the same thing?
Well, you know, adrenaline is a little different. Achievement is when you win the race.
Okay.
When you come across first, or you win the prize, or you accomplish
but even
the goal.
an individual thing in a race car, if I get one corner perfectly, I go,
there you go.
Man, I got turn 4.
Yep.
I mean, that feels
There's your
good,
dopamine.
but now turn 5's coming. And the other thing, I'm not, I play golf every 2 or 3 years, but people have said, you get that one perfect shot, and you keep coming back. And I, again, I'm just a duffer, but I remember once doing a little whiff, chipped out of something that went right in. I went, and I got the reward. That was cool, so I wanted to go back and do it again.
Exactly. And let's see what would happen if we just turned off this one system in the brain. Let's turn off dopamine for a second and see where that gets us. Well, if we didn't get the euphoria of a win, nobody would go to sporting events anymore because winning and losing would feel the same, which would be nothing. Nobody would complete math solutions or home improvement projects because completing the task or not completing the task would feel the same, which would be nothing.
Yeah.
And so if we turned off just this one system based on dopamine, a huge swath of productive human activity would just disappear. Our economy would drop to about half of what it currently is because the feelings that are motivating achievement wouldn't exist anymore. So that achievement would not exist either. So
and our whole theme of managing people is that we're managing feeling. People do things for the emotional payoff.
Right.
And we've identified these 5 as we get through it. So if they don't feel something, nothing happens.
Right. And people need these appetites. I call these social appetites. They need these appetites fed just as much as they need these fed. Okay. We need to achieve like we need food and water and oxygen.
Yes.
So
when people say, I need that like I need air, they're not kidding.
They're not kidding.
That's for sure.
Exactly.
I need to win like I need to breathe.
Right. And if you don't get this one here, the competency pleasure, you're in a mental institution. You're depressed.
Yeah.
So when we say that you need them as much as eating and drinking, breathing, I'm not really kidding.
Yeah, yeah.
You do.
So as a branch manager of a real estate office, I want to manage achievement. The first thing that comes to mind is the listing or sale, but those can be very few and far between on any given month. So tell me how you, again, your wife is a real estate agent. How do you press that hot button of achievement, knowing that maybe she'll get one listing or one sale in the first month as an agent?
Right. And she's frustrated right now because she's already done with her first month and she doesn't have her first listing yet. And so basically it's the manager's job to design the game so that it's challenging but fair and where a good effort results in a win. So for a new person like my wife, it would actually be a pretty smart idea to give her her first listing. Don't make her, work her network for that first one. Let her have that little bit of a win that first month of having her own listing, and see how she does. Because now she's been gone over a month without a listing.
But if she didn't earn that, wouldn't that be negative reinforcement?
Well, again, she's just out of the box. She's just developing her network. She doesn't have her first mailing out yet, and she's feeling a little bit like this is a long haul with maybe not enough reward in it.
Okay.
So
Well, that's why I'm bringing this up, because the listings and sales, managing achievement or rewarding achievement, it's hard to do. If the listing and the sale are the only ways you do it, we've got to find some other ways in between.
Right.
And so what comes to mind for me is I'm never going to win the game of golf with anybody I play with ever in my life. But in 18 holes, I'll probably have a couple of really good shots, just enough to keep me coming back. So using that analogy, how do we create achievement for your wife without giving her a listing? Because I don't know that there's too many companies in a position to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, set some other goals. Say that the main goal is not listing your first month. The main goal is to finish your training, to master these forms and procedures. If she's still in the training period, which she is, then make those the goals and reward those achievements.
Okay.
So there's lots of ways to reward, but if you say that the only way we ever give rewards is through listings,
Yeah,
you pretty much have screwed your new people, because it may take them a year to get a listing, because
well, hopefully it won't take them that long, but I know where you're going with that. So then I guess we talk about managing activities, holding 4 to 10 open houses a week. Of course, that most people do one, but you do 3 or 4 or 5, or calling in for sale by owners or making calls. That's an achievement. It doesn't pay in money, but it pays in terms of you're not going to earn the money unless you do that. Same as weight loss. I can't, haven't lost any weight in the last 5 minutes, but if you had 3 glasses of water, I can reward that. So does that fit your achievement
Sure.
reward?
Yeah. It's breaking a difficult skill down into pieces that you can reward, just like karate. You take this difficult skill, break into lots of sub-skills, and then you reward each little sub-skill as it's mastered.
So the answer to this is managing the achievement hot button is, I think you said, design the game.
Right.
One of the things we talk about is my 30-day up and out plan, where an agent who's not performing, we sit down and give them a month, and we give them specific activities to do, but we can reward those. If we come back and say, how many for sale by owners did you call on? Really? Congratulations. So does that fit this?
Sure.
And they feel good because yeah, but then they'll say, yeah, but I didn't get any of listed. You had no control over that anyway.
Right.
You did that which you had control. That was call them.
Right. And a lot of it is just training the managers to be attentive to these small victories. Because what to a manager who's already a black belt may have the attitude, I'm not going to recognize you until you're a black belt. Well, you know what? You're going to have all disgruntled employees then.
Yeah.
Because you're expecting them to be at your level of expertise, but you've been at it for, 30 years.
Yeah.
So you would never be able to retain employees if you had that attitude. I'm only going to reward you when you get to be as good as me. No, you reward them when they've improved from whatever baseline they're starting at. So there's lots of opportunities to recognize people, and most managers are just completely unaware of that.
Okay.
That they have to also talk to the coworkers. Talk to the coworkers and say, has anybody done anything spectacular or beyond the call of duty this week?
Yeah.
And they're telling you who's been doing the right stuff.
Yeah.
And then you can reward that person based on what you've heard through the grapevine. So you don't have to observe everything yourself. Talk to the coworkers to find out what people are doing right and what people should be acknowledged.
Okay, so the message here is, A, you've got to be engaged with your real estate agent so you know what they're doing.
Right.
And it might have to be at the very minute level. What did you do today? And describe those interactions with customers and clients.
Right.
And then reward incremental.
Just keep moving the bar up. You know, you don't reward for the same small task the next time. You expect the next thing to be mastered.
Yeah.
And you just keep moving the bar up little by little, giving lots of strokes along the way.
Yeah, and I think if I was a manager watching this, I could have a guy for a year where all I do is reward him for holding open house and calling for sale by owners and they never get a sale or listing. Well, if you're giving reward to behavior that you think creates listing and says, you shouldn't have to worry about that. I mean, if somebody's rewarding, you had 8 glasses of water, you did 20 minutes of exercise, you ate fruits and vegetables, shouldn't the weight take care of itself? Shouldn't the money take care of itself?
Well, you may have to reward some fairly inane things at the start, but as you go, you're rewarding more and more difficult types of performance. So by the time the person's a black belt, you're rewarding them on black belt performance.
Yeah, exactly. So your level of reward would match the level of expectation where they
Just
are.
like a handicap in golf. You don't expect a new golfer to be, shooting par, so you give them a handicap to let them enjoy the game. They can play with a more experienced player and still have a competition and have the pleasure of that competition, but they're not held to the same standard at the start. Because it just doesn't make sense to hold them to the same standard. They will not get any reward that way.
Yeah. Okay, so our third hot button is achievement. Now, number 4.
And the next one is also fairly easy to understand. We've got a technology, we've mastered that technology, we've used that technology to achieve goals. Now we have to use that technology cooperatively. So we have to work as a team and develop strong relationships. And that's related to the neuropeptides oxytocin and vasopressin, which are called the relationship hormones.
I deal with those all the time. No, I'm just kidding.
You can actually get an oxytocin spray.
Can you really?
Yeah, and if you and I were playing, let's say, an economic game theory game where I have to trust you, that I'm going to give you money and trust that you'll give it back to me later in the game, if I've had the oxytocin spray, I will be way more trusting and give you way more money than if I didn't. So it creates warm feelings of trust. And in the workplace, the idea is that alone, if we use this kind of, these things are necessary for our survival, you could have all the skills in the world and be achieving like crazy, but if you're a lone human being out on the Serengeti plain, you're dead. A lone human being is not very formidable. But a group of human beings with a common technology working as a team, that's formidable. Okay. And so this is about creating deep personal relationships with your teammates and with your manager. And it's these relationships that are like, think of the wires connecting computers. Those wires allow knowledge and energy to flow to where they're most needed. Okay. That's what a relationship does in a business. It's the wires that create a network. And so a big part of my training is how do you create those relationships? And it just creates such a more powerful company if the people are networked through these deep personal relationships. And to create those, you've got to make it personal. You can't have an arm's length relationship where we're just at work, you're just an employee, I don't really care about you, and if you don't do your work, you're gone. That is not a relationship. Okay. Relationship is, I admire you, I care for you, I'm going to try to develop and bring out the best of you in you, and I'm your mentor, and you can always come to me for help or just to talk. That's how you create those relationships, is to have a mentoring servant leader approach, and over about a 4-month period, it doesn't come immediately. People are not trusting by nature. Okay. You have to earn trust, and it takes 4 months, from the Bob Carpenter story in our first segment. And if you do that, you would just create what I call a superorganism, a group of human beings who think and act as a unit. And that is way more powerful than a bunch of individuals fighting for resources and, fighting for the next rung on the ladder. Well,
I'm thinking about there's a trend in the real estate industry right now to get away from a lot of the bricks and mortar, because it's just killed a lot of the companies.
Right.
When the market tanked, they're stuck with thousands of square feet of space, and a lot of brokers are moving towards getting rid of that and having one little tiny office and having all their agents out in their cars and homes. And I'm watching this and thinking from a financial profit, I get that, but it absolutely violates any chance for them to get together. So
right. You'd have to be smart about that. You'd have to have get-togethers and celebrations and things where you're bringing people together to develop these relationships. And you might pair people up, just randomly. Pair employee B with employee D and say, okay, you're going to meet twice a week with your mentoree.
I like that. Yeah, okay.
And get together over coffee and discuss how things are going and help each other solve problems. There you're connecting to the computers. And then after, say, a month or two, you switch the pairings. And you're constantly switching the mentoring groups. And you can still create those relationships. You don't necessarily need a building, although having a building where people come daily helps.
Well, it doesn't have to be an office building. We can go to a restaurant
right.
if they want. Because I'm thinking the expense of bricks and mortar is killing a lot of these real estate
right.
companies. But real estate agents are very social people.
Sure.
And they don't work well sitting in their home
right.
by themselves. Because
right.
5 minutes later they're on Jerry Springer, and then they get on their computer, and they get on Facebook and YouTube, and then pretty soon their day's gone.
Sure.
So I'm troubled by this, send them out in your car and we'll see you later. And you're verifying that they've got to be a team.
Right.
Any other suggestions you have on this? Because I think that's going to be an important part of this.
Well, creating these connections is simple in concept, difficult in practice.
Yeah, exactly.
It takes effort.
Yeah.
But in concept, it's fairly simple. You have to admire the other person. You have to value the other person, because I'm not going to invest in you, David, unless I admire you. Mm-hmm. It's like I would invest in a mutual fund that I didn't think was a winner. Yeah. You have to look for value in people. And
so you're talking about the relationship between the manager and the agent, as well as
right.
the agent to agent.
Correct.
So this applies to both.
Right.
Okay.
So, just telling our stories, we know each other's stories at least fairly well, but the more deeply we delve into our personal stories, the more I can look for things that I admire about you. So it sounds very simple, and it is simple to find value in people. But it's also very difficult because our brain is set up to look for differences. You went to the wrong school, you're the wrong religion, the wrong political motivation, the wrong body shape, the wrong sex, we're very attuned to stereotyping people. And so you got to push past all those stereotypes and find out something about that person, that you admire. And that won't happen by magic. You got to sit down and say, hey, where are you from? Just find out their story. That's where that curiosity comes in.
Well, that goes back to, I was in a manager's meeting the other day, and talking about the question I asked is, write down 3 people that you hope will be gone when you get to work today. Right. People that need to be fired, and then they all write it down. I ask them why, and a big one. Obviously, prospecting, listing, selling, production, performance always comes up, but I'd say half of came up to attitude in the office,
right.
which led to the interaction and the bantering back and forth in a bad way.
Sure.
And so that was a big deal.
Yeah, well, if people aren't having their hot buttons pressed, they're not going to be happy campers. They're going to be either actively disengaged, where they hate their work and want to actually cause damage, or they'll be what's called disengaged, which means that they'll put in the minimum for the pay and not a tiny bit more than that. Yeah. So anyway, you asked about the two steps to create these relationships. One is you have to value the other party, and secondly, you have to invest. You have to help them solve problems. You have to go beyond the call of duty. A friend of mine, I asked him to take it to the next level of leadership. He goes, well, what do you mean? I said, if an employee has a house fire, I want you to save the family pet. And his eyes got really big. And then I said, if an employee needs a kidney transplant, I want you to be the donor. His eyes got even bigger. And I was exaggerating, but if you can be a first responder when an employee has a problem, that person will go, walk through walls for you. But if you're not willing to go beyond the call of duty, why on earth would you expect your employee to go beyond the call of duty for you? Yeah. They won't. Good point. So, anyway, it's simple. Value, invest. And if you do that for 4 months, all of a sudden, something sort of magical happens. It doesn't feel like that's an employee anymore. That person feels like part of you, like part of your family. Think of your kids. If your kid is hurt, you feel that hurt intimately and directly. If your kid has a success, you feel that like it was your success. Right. Well, that's the feeling you want with your employees as well. When they have a success, you want to feel it like it's your success. And the only way that'll happen is by you valuing and investing your employees, and over a period of time a bond forms, and that bonding process has a psychiatric term called cathexis. You bring that other person inside your identity and they become part of you in a very real sense, like almost like an owned asset. You know, they become a sense of, you have a sense of ownership and protection around that person. And that's how human beings work, and that's how relationships work. You've got to value, you've got to invest in it, or over a period of about 4 months, you'll create the bond.
Okay. Final question at this point, maybe more of a practical one. Some of these managers are managing huge offices, 40, 50, 60, hundreds. Now some of them may have assistant managers, but how do you do that with large numbers?
Well, you know, there's enlightened leaders who have done it with 10,000 employees, so it can be done. You can't be you can't give everyone the same amount of attention because there are not enough hours in a day. Here's an example of how Harry Quadracci did it at Quad Graphics. He had about 8,000 employees, maybe 15 printing plants around the country. At Christmas time, his wife baked 8,000 cookies, and he went to every plant on both shifts and gave every employee a chocolate chip cookie at Christmas. Well, big deal, chocolate chip cookie, but his employees were very appreciative that the CEO and founder of the company would go to the trouble to visit everyone and give everyone a cookie. You know, that's servant leadership. That's going beyond the call of duty. And it was a lot of effort, but the loyalty and hard work that he recouped from that was way more than the effort he put in. Or, you know, how many employees you have? Say you have 1,000 employees. Maybe 2 or 3 of those have a disaster in their family every year. And if you respond to those 3, everyone else assumes that you'll respond to them as well. So you get credit from everybody, but you've only done it 3 times. So there's ways to kind of leverage. You know, people also understand you're a busy guy. If you give them any attention, that's pretty cool. You know,
I like your idea of leverage too, because one of my answers to people who said, "Gosh, how do I do this 30-day up and out, and how do I coach all of my agents?" And I said, "Well, maybe you don't. Maybe you coach 1, and then you coach 2, and then maybe 3, because pretty soon everybody in the office finds out that Bob and Mary and Susan are all doubled their income because of what the manager did, and pretty soon you, I guess, 1 at a time in some cases as well." Okay.
So it can be done, and people are understanding. They know what your time commitments are, and they appreciate whatever little bit you can of attention and investment you can give them.
Okay, Paul, so we have covered innovation, competency, achievement, cooperation, and what is the 5th and final hot button?
Well, this is the easiest one
good.
to understand because it's the most obvious, and that's self-protection. And this is the source of ballistic emotions like anger, fear, and rage. When people feel threatened, it triggers this system, and it creates these angry, defensive emotions. And so we want to press these 4 buttons. This is the one we don't want to press because it is a source of anger and nasty emotions that we don't want to have in the workplace. I use the analogy of an iceberg to illustrate what I mean by emotions. You know, in an iceberg, only the tip sticks out above the water, and these are the angry, nasty emotions that we don't want in the workplace. But beneath the waterline, there's a much bigger piece of the iceberg, and that's these natural pleasures of productive human beings. You want these pleasures because that's what motivates achievement. So these are the good emotions, and these are sort of the angry, destructive emotions.
So you don't want to piss off your agents, is what you're saying.
No, you really don't. You don't want to threaten your agents. And there's lots of ways you can run afoul of this particular appetite. So
Let me stop you for a second. Telling somebody in a kinder way that, you know, if you don't perform, we're going to fire you, because they do have the right to fire people. Does that fall into that, or is that irrelevant? I mean, they have the right to fire.
Yeah, you know, that's really the ultimate threat is firing, because it causes horrendous damage to the person who's fired in terms of their self-esteem and their assets and their investments, and, you know, so it's a very damaging thing to do to somebody.
And you wouldn't use it to manage somebody. It's something you do when all else has failed.
Well, you know, in my system, if somebody doesn't respond to having their hot buttons pressed, then it'll be pretty obvious that they just don't belong there. They don't enjoy that type of work, or they're in the wrong spot. So hopefully they'll leave voluntarily.
That's a good point. So no matter how good you are at managing these 4 skills, if they're in an occupation for which they are not trained or good at, then it doesn't matter how good a leader you are.
They don't value, right.
Yeah. Okay.
And then it should be kind of obvious that they don't fit with this culture, and that if they don't leave voluntarily, the other employees will probably kind of nudge them out the door.
Yeah, sure.
So ideally, I think if you manage with human nature, it'll kind of take care of itself.
Yeah. So let's go to just the day-to-day avoiding that. What are some suggestions you have for that?
Well, this is the fight-flight response. It's norepinephrine, cortisol, the stress hormones, and you need a little bit of stress in your life to get out of bed in the morning. So having a little bit of pressing this button kind of gets you moving. There's always the implicit threat, if I don't do my work, I'll get fired. So there's a good amount of stress, and then there's harmful stress. But the concept of how not to run afoul of this is a little bit complicated in terms of you really have to understand what your employees value, what their investment portfolio looks like. Like, David, I know you ride motorcycles, so you probably pride yourself on motorcycles and car racing. And so if I criticize those things, you'd get upset. And if I put say one of these polygraph machines on you, it would show a response if I said something negative about motorcycles or car racing. So I would know that that's something that's important to you, and I should avoid criticizing that aspect.
Okay, so criticism falls into this.
It does.
Okay, all right.
Because criticism is a threat on our sense of identity. It's saying you're not good at something. So it's saying you're not competent. It gets back to this. It's a loss of good feeling about ourselves.
Okay, I look at self-protection. I think of a couple things. Number one, legal and financial. Real estate agents have huge amounts of legal liability in terms of disclosures about the property and all the different laws within which we must act. And we want them to fear stepping out of those. So does that fit in there, teaching people the proper legal contract law and finance law, et cetera?
Well, laws are set up for people who don't want to do the right thing naturally. So hopefully, if you have good agents who care about the customer.
Well, some of it's just a matter of teaching. People have to understand RESPA, the real estate settlement procedure. They need to understand some of those things.
They got to follow rules, and that's just part of being a realtor.
Yeah.
Did I say it right?
Realtor.
Realtor.
Yeah.
And but anyway, this is really fairly basic, is that you want to learn what's important to your employees and not threaten those things. You want to help them develop their abilities, not tear them down. If you attack somebody, that's going to alert this system, and now you've got the defenses up.
Yeah.
So defensive behavior is when you didn't do this right, when you've approached somebody in a way that they felt threatened.
Okay.
And like I said earlier, you can always make a correction in the sense of, I'm going to suggest you do something different to make you stronger and better. And that's a way not to trigger this system. Otherwise, I could come in and say, that was stupid. Who taught you that? With a bad attitude, negative attitude. Well, now I've pressed this button big time, and I've made an enemy out of my employee.
Okay.
So it's all in how you approach it, being a little nuanced, and when you make a correction, put it in a positive light. I'm trying to make you the best real estate agent in this company. Yeah. And this is what I suggest you do, and I think it'll help you.
Does self-protection fall in? I'm thinking of more practical things. There's been, unfortunately, too many reports of people who've been injured in this line of work, whether it's an open house. I don't need to go into the bad details, but a single woman in an open house.
Absolutely.
I mean, self-protection.
Right.
Part of pushing that button in a positive way is to make sure you literally protect the physical, your real estate agent from physical harm, making sure, whether it's walking somebody to their car late at night or making sure that in that open house they're safe. Well, Paul, when I take a look at this pie chart, I see the biological needs, which we all know if you don't have them, you're going to die. And the point you've been making is that the social needs, if you don't have those met, you're going to die.
You're going to die.
And if I'm a branch manager of a real estate company and I want to get salespeople to rise to get them to do whatever it is they want to do. I need to manage them through their feelings, and I need to invest in them emotionally through these 5 hot buttons. Is that,
Yeah.
do I understand that properly?
Yeah, if you're a servant leader who's emotionally intelligent and you know how to press these hot buttons, you're adding that bonus to the paycheck that's going to be the difference between high performance and low performance.
Okay. So they can earn money anywhere, but in terms of the emotional payoff, they're going to get it from only those good leaders.
Well, you can only pay people in feelings. Why is money motivating? It's motivating because what you could turn it into.
Right.
A hot new car, a night out with your honey, or an exotic vacation. It all boils down to feelings. You can only reward a human being with feelings. So this is a way to increase those rewarding feelings, boost the paycheck, get better performance. It's really pretty simple.
If you'd like to learn more about everything we've talked about today, be sure to check out this book, Primal Management by Paul Herr. And Paul, thank you very, very much for being involved in our Knox Management Training Series.
I feel honored, David.
Well, no, I am. Thank you very much. And thanks for joining us on Knox Management Training.